Introduce Dr. Toby Gifford. Toby is a designer, creative coder, and media arts practitioner, and a national advocate of inclusive and accessible digital design. He's a senior lecturer in design at the University of Sunshine Coast, where he convenes the Inclusive Digital Design Micro-Credential course. We're looking forward to hearing from Toby today about what digital accessibility is, why it's important, and hear those practical tips for bringing digital accessibility to the workplace. So now I'd like to pass over to Toby, and thank you so much, Toby, for being involved in today's session. I know you've got some slides that you're going to refer to.
Yes.
So
Thank,
I'll let you share and pass over to you. Thank you.
thanks, Amy. Thanks for that introduction. So this is Toby Gifford speaking. I'm a middle-aged man with a kind of salt and pepper beard, wearing a blue shirt and a headset. And I'm just going to share some slides that I've prepared. Talking today about digital accessibility. As Amy said, I am a lecturer at the University of the Sunshine Coast. I lecture in design, various kinds, but one of the things I talk about is digital design, particularly web design and document design and so on. And before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I am on the traditional country of the Gubbi Gubbi peoples, and also my work sometimes takes me to the lands of the Jinnabara peoples, and
Mm.
so I acknowledge elders past and present. Um, it's always the way that the Zoom toolbar gets in the way of whatever you're trying to do, I find. There we go. So the reason I guess why I am here is that I have been teaching a micro-credential course in inclusive digital design, which is a course that's been running a few times now. It was funded by the Commonwealth Government. They had a kind of grant for new micro-credentials, and so we pitched one in collaboration with the Centre for Accessibility Australia, which was about digital accessibility. And so I've got on the screen now just a screenshot of the Commonwealth Government's micro-credential seeker site for this particular course, which has a overview of it and some stuff about start dates and duration and so on, it's an 8-week course delivered online. Oops. So what is digital accessibility? Well, we're really talking about designing digital communications to be accessible to people with disability. The course that I just mentioned is called Digital Inclusivity, which is kind of a slightly broader perspective, I guess, which is really about making digital communications inclusive to all people, including people with disability. But there are, other categories of people that find that digital interfaces are mismatched to their abilities, essentially, or their ways of understanding or communicating. So really the idea here is that looking at digital accessibility in particular, which is kind of that, but particularly thinking about people with disability, is that recognizing that digital interfaces that we deal with every day are often, well, they're basically designed by people with particular sets of abilities, and they're usually designed to work with those sets of abilities, and so consequently, often mismatched to people who aren't the designer. And I guess a key point of a sort of philosophical point of this idea of digital accessibility is to understand that the issue here is in the interface design, not in the person who is finding the communications inaccessible. So we're really trying to think about ways you can design things that work for as many people as possible. And what are we talking about when I'm talking about digital communications? Well, I guess I'm really talking about things, electronic documents like Microsoft Word and Adobe PDF, and also websites or intranets, so sort of company internal websites. Obviously, there's a lot more things that you could call digital communications and phone calls and so on. But in terms of digital accessibility, what I'm sort of mostly focusing on, or at least what we mostly focus on in that course, is these kind of really common interfaces that we need to use in business and in life. That we basically just can't avoid in the modern world. So, most kind of workplaces, you will end up encountering Microsoft Word and Adobe PDF documents as they're really quite standard in, most business communications or organizational communications. And in work and in life, websites and intranets are ubiquitous now. And so I was kind of intrigued by the number of people who listed the phone or the computer as the bit of technology they can't live without. And Sarah, I was intrigued to hear you talking about the phone as really your accessibility portal in a way. So I think the point is that, for everyone now, these kind of technological communication interfaces are they're key to life. You can't live. I mean, imagine not having a phone now. I met someone recently who deliberately didn't have a phone and actually came to a workshop here at UniSC and was quite frustrated by the fact that he couldn't park because they've taken away the ability to put coins in the parking meters now. You have to download an app onto your phone. That's the only way to do parking on the campus. So anyway, the point is it's virtually impossible to live without a phone these days. And if the kinds of ways that you interact with your phone don't work for you, then, that's a real problem. And there's things that life critical to life, like doing your taxes or accessing healthcare or emergency services and so on, that, if you can't access, then it's a real problem. So it's critical that these kind of interfaces are designed in ways that can work for as many people as possible. And for many people with disabilities, the kind of default way that um, websites or documents have been designed are not always suitable. So there's lots of different ways in which designed interfaces can be mismatched with people, according to, how they are. But one kind of large category that's often what people think about when they're talking about digital accessibility most is, excuse me, is vision impairment. So people who are blind or have low vision are naturally um, mismatched with the kind of ocular centric approach of our society. So there's a lot of focus on visual things in the way that our digital communications have evolved. We tend to look at things on a screen as the sort of primary way of communicating. So if you can't see the screen, then obviously that is problematic. Um, and so for people who are blind or have low vision sufficiently low that, you can't see a screen, then it's very common to use what's called an assistive technology called a screen reader. So this is software that goes on your computer or your phone that can basically read out aloud what is on the screen. And a lot of digital accessibility yeah, the details of actually making something digitally accessible is kind of around how do you make it work best, most naturally and most intuitively and most sort of efficiently for people using a screen reader. And there's a few different screen readers that are out there popularly used. So most of them, I'm just going to talk about computers for the moment, but most of them, well, the majority of them are for Windows computers, and there is one option for Macintosh computers. So the kind of venerable one is called JAWS, and it's been around for a long time, and is quite popular. I saw a stat recently that I think still maybe 35% of screen reader usage or so on around the world is JAWS. It is quite expensive, so it's not very inclusive itself in that regard. Um, and then there is a sort of, I guess, popular alternative to JAWS called NVDA, which is actually a Queensland company who have made this software and it's free. I personally find it easier to use than JAWS in many ways. So that's kind of a nice option. And then the operating systems themselves, so Windows itself has a screen reader called Narrator, which is built in now to Windows 10 and Windows 11. And on Macintosh, there is a built-in screen reader called VoiceOver. So all of these are things that will basically take what's on the screen and try and read it out. But they can only do it if the document has been structured correctly so that it's actually able to get the information from the screen. And just in terms of, the utilities of these different screen readers, Well, for a start, it's if you haven't ever used a screen reader before, it's quite an interesting experience to try one because they do take a bit of getting used to. And when you see someone who's a skilled screen reader user, it's really impressive to watch how they get around the place. It still blows my mind, and the speed at which they put the kind of talking up to is quite entertaining to impressive to watch. But in any case, it's quite a great test of your document or your website to have a crack at trying to experience it through a screen reader. And what I have found is that in reality, the built-in narrator and voiceover, so those are the ones that come with Macintosh and Windows, they don't really cut it at the end of the day, and they don't seem to be actually fully featured enough that you could genuinely use them as a blind or low vision person. I'd love to hear from you if you think differently. But for people who are, seriously trying to navigate without sight at all, their sites, JAWS and NVDA, seem to be the most popular and useful. And JAWS seems to be the best when it comes to reading documents like PDFs and Word in particular, whereas NVDA is kind of a little more tuned to websites. And I mean, they both do both, but kind of better in one or the other. Um, so, but not all people who are vision impaired use screen readers. So there are people with low vision who, their vision is not so low that they can't see anything, but it is, lower than often whoever it was that designed the document. And um, that can be because of a kind of a vision condition, or in fact, anybody over 50 is likely to have deteriorating vision, such as myself, which is why I used my reading glasses as my favorite technology. And so this concept of, low vision is actually a very um, common thing to have. And, forgetting about assistive technologies, just in terms of how you visually design something, it's worth keeping in mind some tips to take into account people with lower vision of various kinds. Or there's also about 8% of people who have color vision deficiency, which means that there's various types of that, but they may not be able to distinguish between different colors as well as others. So what that implies when we're thinking about how we make our documents or our websites work as broadly as we can for people with vision impairments, the key thing is that in order for screen readers to be able to understand a document, the document needs to have structure that can be understood. And I'll explain what that means in a second, but it basically means that when you're creating your document, there's ways that you can mark certain sections like headings and so on as structure. And that marking of that in the right way allows a screen reader to know what the headings are and easily enable you to navigate around the document if you're using a screen reader. And it's quite easy to not use that structure as well. So this is kind of the basic problem, and a simple tip is to just understand the mechanisms for putting that structure into the documents you're making. And I'll show you an example of how to do that in a second. Um, a second really important thing is that whenever you have an image that, at least if it's an image that's important, so it's not just a decorative image which is there to look pretty, but it actually is conveying some information. So a screen reader can't understand that. I mean, as AI gets more and more um, able, I guess it might get to the point where a screen reader can, reliably look at an image and give a decent translation of that, but we're not there yet. So whenever you have an image in your website or in your document that contains important information, then it needs to have something called alternative text set. So alternative text is some text that gets attached to the image. It's usually hidden from a sighted user, but it is available to a screen reader. And that basically is just a description of what is in the image. So those two things are very important for screen reader users, but for people with vision impairment who aren't using a screen reader, there's a couple of considerations that are most simple, which is the text needs to be large enough. Don't use really small fonts because as people's eyes age, their ability to see things that are small diminishes. And secondly, you need to have sufficient contrast. So that's kind of the difference in visibility of the text to the background. That's important for people with low vision, but it's also important for people who are colorblind or have color vision deficiencies. And
Mm.
um, what you need to understand in that regard is that if you have a color vision deficiency, you might be able you can often distinguish between bright and dark, but not always between different hues of color, as they call them. So I've made a quick little example of a website with some bad color contrast. And this is where, for example, I'm showing a page that has a variety of different text on different backgrounds, and there's a bad example which is using a kind of an orange text on a tan background. And they get progressively worse as you scroll down. So the point is that even if for some eyes, like a bright red on a bright green background would pop out, for people who don't have red-green distinction in their color vision, that just looks like a flat panel. So there is a number of free tools that you can use that allow you to do contrast checking. And one of them is called the Color Contrast Analyzer. I have this app on my computer here, and I'm just showing the app now. And it basically gives you two little eyedroppers that you can hover over a bit of foreground text. So I'm hovering over some black writing here and clicking, and it's finding that color. And then it's another eyedropper for the background. So I'm hovering this eyedropper over a kind of tan background, and it basically tells you what level of brightness contrast there is between the foreground text and the background. So in this particular example that I've just chosen, it's I've got a bunch of green ticks, which is basically saying that that is sufficient contrast um, for uh, for reading. Whereas if I chose one of this sort of orange over tan, that's an example of bad contrast, then it will say that it's failed on all these measures. I won't talk about what these measures actually are. They're kind of technical measures, but basically it's a tick or a fail, and that's a really handy tool. Just to, it's free. I think someone put in the chat where to download it, and that's kind of be a quick way to scan to make sure that your contrast is sufficient. So that was it's super a super whirlwind tour of digital accessibility for vision impairment. There's obviously a lot more to it than that, but time is short here. So I want to move on to another kind of important category of digital accessibility, and that is for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. And uh, there are a few considerations for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, but the key one is that whenever there's audio content, it needs to be captioned, and this is very often not the case in websites and videos online and so on. Still a long way to go in terms of the captioning of audio content. And what that means is that if there's anything that's, being information is being conveyed through audio, then there needs to be a text version of that available to people. So if you are making a video and you're putting it up on YouTube or something like that, now YouTube and Vimeo and these online video providers all now have reasonably capable automatic transcription. So generally speaking, most videos will have some kind of transcription on them, unless they're a bit older. If they're like YouTube or Vimeo hosted, if you're talking about a website. But nevertheless, even though, again, AI is getting better and better, still you'll find that automatic transcription of videos and of talking is not really sufficient. So if you are going to put a video online as part of your website, then you do need to go through and just check it and kind of edit it for accuracy. And there's also an important consideration with captions is that captions can be open or closed. And open captions mean they're essentially burnt into the video itself. They're kind of part of the video image, whereas a closed caption is kind of a text-based version that is overlaid on top of the video that you can turn on or off. And in general, closed captions are much better because they're they're more flexible in many ways. And the interesting thing about this, and I guess a recurring message about digital accessibility is even if you're designing something specifically for the purpose of making it something accessible to a person who is deaf or a person who has visual impairment, the kind of changes that you make or the ways that the inclusive aspects that you build in can often be beneficial for a much broader audience than that particular target. So, for example, captioning of audio content actually benefits a lot of people. So even anyone whose hearing is able to hear that audio content but wants to consume the video in a noisy environment, for example, captions can be very helpful. But there's also quite a range of neurodiversity of people with neurodiversity who find that having captions alongside the audio version makes it easier for them to understand. And the good thing about closed captions is that you can be flexible about where you put them. So we've just said that some people, such as myself, can't see things that are very small. So if your captions are too small, or have bad contrast, then that doesn't really help. And so the nice thing about closed captions is there's often flexibility in the user themselves can position where they come on the screen, how big the font is, what the color of the font is, and so on. So it's kind of a nice consideration. Um, a third broad category of mismatch between frequently designed digital interfaces and people is when you have limited mobility, in particular for, I guess, if we're talking about websites, really difficulty using input devices such as a mouse and a keyboard are pretty common. So difficulty using a mouse is particularly common, and it's not just limited to, I mean, there's some examples where, using a mouse is kind of impossible, and one is if you don't have arms, for example, or hands. But it's actually much broader than that, in that many people, such as myself, who can use a mouse, prefer not to because I have really bad RSI from mouse overuse. And that is actually about 25% of all people who use computers have that issue. So, again, this idea of thinking about a way of designing something for different abilities can end up being very beneficial for a broader range of people. Um, So difficulty using a mouse is very common, but also some people are not able to use a keyboard, again, because they might not have hands or they might not have the control of the hands required to use that. And there are assistive technologies called switch devices, which basically can help people input information into the computer that aren't able to use a standard mouse or a keyboard. Whoops. So one of the key design imperatives for making sure your website or document is usable by people with limited manual dexterity is that it can be navigated with a keyboard only. So, and it's quite amazing once you look at a website or a document, well, websites in particular, and try navigating around them with a keyboard. Um, Often you'll find that there are areas of the website that you can't get to, or the order that you get to them is quite unintuitive. And so that's a kind of an important consideration. Now, I also just said that there are people who can't use a keyboard, but even in that case, it's important to design a website for keyboard navigation because the switch devices that I talked about, which, for example, are we have one student in our course here who has cerebral palsy and he can't use his hands to type in a keyboard, but he does have some buttons that are in the sides of his wheelchair headrest that he's able to move his head and can basically click on. He's got two buttons that he can click, and watching him get around websites and applications is just incredible. He's a demon. He zips through things, um, just using his head basically. He also uses eye tracking, which is another kind of technology, but it's important for him to be able to use these two buttons. And even though they don't look like a keyboard, they kind of, as far as the website's concerned, they kind of are a keyboard. They're just two keys. So not only is it important that your website can be navigated with a keyboard only, it's important that it can be navigated with just a couple of keys. And usually those are the tab and the enter. If you've only got two, it's tab and enter. And if you can get like five, then you might have some arrow keys as well. So that's something to think about. Talking a bit in abstract here, but I wanted to get to an example. So I'm going to look at a Word document which has some accessibility issues. Um, and I've got it open here. So I've just opened a Word document, and this particular exercise, it's hard for me to audio describe this without giving the game away. So for anyone who can't see this Word document that I've got on my screen now, I apologize. This will make second sense in a second. But for anyone who can see it, um, have a quick look at this and see if you can um, identify what might be some accessibility issues. So the document is about Domino. It's a sort of article about Domino's Pizza being required to make their app and website accessible. This was a genuine court case that happened in the United States where um, somebody sued Domino's Pizza because their online ordering website was not accessible. So I'll give you a quick look. There's two pages here. The second page has got a picture of the pizza. And so it basically starts with a title, and then it's got some key points, which was a blind man successfully sued Domino's Pizza, blah, 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 blah. And then it's got another title and some paragraph about the background, and then the complaint details, an image of the pizza, and the outcome and implications. So has anyone got any idea, anyone who is able to see this, what some problems might be with this document?
There's no description of the image.
Yeah, so the image itself, I'm scrolling down and I'm clicking on the image, and in the sidebar here, it has, so I'm in Microsoft Word, and Microsoft Word has the capacity to put alternative text for images. And if I open up the alt text, I've got the alt text box open here, and it's got nothing in it, basically. So this image has not had an textual description given. So someone trying to read it with a screen reader, it would just say image, and it wouldn't be meaningful.
It's just Amy speaking, Toby. Billy has just entered in the chat font variables question mark. So I think
Yes, I think maybe that what you might be saying, Billy, is that the fonts are all over the place.
Yeah, it
Which
varies in distance apart, types of font.
mm,
Yeah, it just feels a bit like it would be a bit of a mess for someone to use a screen read.
Well, interestingly, for a screen reader doesn't actually care about that at all, because screen readers don't look at font size. They don't care about the spacing between things. And for someone who is not using a screen reader, or for someone with neurodiversity, or even just anyone, to be honest, reading this visually is a nightmare because the fonts are all over the place and the spacing's all over the place. I think that's actually because, so I got this example from the Scott Hollier from the Centre for Accessibility, who is blind. So he made this. And I think because of that, visually it looks problematic. But I mean, that is an accessibility issue, right? Because most people are reading things visually. You want things to work for people visually as well. So having the same font everywhere and the spacing would help. But I'm particularly thinking in this example of things that a screen reader would that are not set up properly for a screen reader. Well, I might just tell you because it's sort of hard to actually know without clicking in the document. So the first thing is that the title here, which is Domino's Pizza required to make app accessible, and then all of the subtitles, key points, complaint details, etc., they're not using heading or title styles. So in Word, if I go to I'm opening the ribbon, and any bit of text in Word can have a style applied to it. And you might think of these styles, so we've got like normal or heading one, heading two, subtle emphasis, etc. People often think of these styles as being things which are just visual aid, how you format things to look good, but they're actually the things that define the structure of the document that a screen reader can understand. So what a screen reader wants to look for is headings and a hierarchy of headings. So when you've got a title, the main title of the document, you should use a heading 1 style. So I'm going to click on heading 1. I've got my cursor on the main title and I'm clicking on heading 1. And now that's obviously changed how it looks, but you can reformat what a heading 1 looks like. But the point is now that a screen reader will at least know that there's a level 1 heading. And in fact, if I go to the View panel and select Navigation pane, and select the tab of Navigation pane that orders things by headings, at least now it's got, before I did that, it would have had nothing in the headings. There's no list of headings, and a screen reader that goes to that doesn't know anything about the structure of this, and it just basically starts reading the document from the top without giving the ability to the screen reader user to quickly navigate through it. Whereas if I make this a heading 1, and then these next headings I make a heading 2, so I'm just going through all the little subheadings and clicking on heading 2. Then in the navigation pane, there is now a hierarchy of headings that a screen reader user will get announced to them. There's a mechanism for listing all the headings and navigating through the headings quickly. So that's one thing. Jeff, I think, said that section of all caps is also not good, and that's right. And it's not just because it's difficult to read, it's because when you're using a screen reader, caps often do change the way that it is read out. So, for example, this all caps section is, "It is unlawful for businesses to deny individuals, blah, blah, blah." The problem is a screen reader reading this out, when it sees IT in capitals, will read out IT rather than it, because it thinks it's an abbreviation for information technology. And there's a bunch of other kind of all caps things that get read out strangely in a screen reader. So you don't want to use all caps in your document. So we've got three things. That was also that we needed alternative text for the image. There's another important thing here that we've got some hyperlinks which say click here to read more. And so there's another one, I think, up the top here, click here to read more. So whenever you've got hyperlinks, what you need to do to make it accessible is to have the text that is linked to be descriptive of what the actual link is. So rather than having click here to read more as the hyperlink, we should say the BBC online article, and even maybe a little bit more about what that article is, and have that as the hyperlink. And the reason for that is if you're using a screen reader, you can list all of the hyperlinks, but it will just list what is the text that's hyperlinked. So, I mean, in this document, it's not so bad because there's only 2 of them. But if you had a big document with heaps of hyperlinks and you just, using a screen reader, listed all the links, it would just say, click here, click here, click here, click here. And you wouldn't have any idea which link you were talking about. And then lastly, the key points here has got a list of items that have asterisks to start, but this is not using the actual list format in Word, which means that a screen reader will just read asterisks, "A blind man successfully sued Domino's," asterisks, blah, blah, blah. Whereas if you use the inbuilt screen list style, then a screen reader will basically know that it's a list and allow the user to jump over to any particular point or just jump over the list entirely. So anyway, that's a quick example of the kind of things that we're talking about. But I guess the key point is that there's these structural aspects, which are headings and list styles, that are the kind of abstract information that you need to put in as structure to your document so that a screen reader can understand it. How am I going for time, Amy? Would you like me to kind of wrap up in a sec, or have I got a few more minutes?
Yeah, it's just Amy speaking. Yep, you've got maybe a couple more minutes and then we
Couple
might go to
minutes.
questions.
Cool. Okay.
Thanks, Toby.
Well, I won't go into too much detail then about the next thing, but PDF documents are another really common thing you find in a workplace. And PDF documents historically have been a bit of an accessibility nightmare in that they're have been very difficult for screen readers to work their way around, but they now can be made accessible if you do the work. And often it's quite a bit of work to make a PDF accessible. You basically have to define what's called an accessibility tag tree. And the way you do that is using Adobe Acrobat, which is pretty horrible software to use, to be honest, and kind of expensive. So that is a bit of an issue with digital accessibility, but that's just the reality. There is another company called Grackle Docs who make an alternative to PDF, to Acrobat. So that's another thing you can consider. Grackle PDF is sort of designed to be much easier to use than Acrobat. But in any case, that's a whole quite big, a whole quite big area of digital accessibility. So, um, what where do you go next? What are some key takeaways? Well, key takeaways include alt text for any informative images. Um, One key tip I have is actually try reading your document or website with a screen reader, because all of the tips in accessibility that you can take away, I don't think any is as comprehensive test of your actual document as actually trying to consume it with a screen reader. It'll often show up things that you didn't find before. Check for poor contrast. Download one of those free contrast checkers, and that's just an easy win, really. Use proper structure, and Microsoft Office and Acrobat have built-in accessibility checkers, which can at least give you a quick heads up about any issues that you might have. So, for further information, you can go to the Centre for Accessibility Australia, who are, I guess, the peak body for digital accessibility. They've got an accessibility hub with lots and lots of info for both with people who have disability and trying to set up assistive technologies, or people trying to design documents that work. There's also an online toolkit that the South Australian government funded, which is a great tool. So this is their accessibility toolkit, and it's got a bunch of tiles. I'm just looking at their website, looking at the different tiles. It's got introductory guides, and then it's got things focused on if you're a project manager or a visual designer or a website developer, etc., whole bunches of information there. What about some free training? Well, at the UniSC, we offer a free introduction to inclusive digital design, which is actually a taster course for our micro credential, but it's entirely free and runs anytime. We've had 1,000 enrollments so far, which is great. And yes, you're welcome to enroll. It's 6 modules that kind of give you a bit of a taste of it. There is also the World Wide Web Consortium's Introduction to Web Accessibility. This is a free course online. It's particularly about websites, not so much about documents. And then in terms of paid training, more sort of in depth, Vision Australia do a really great bunch of online training. I've taken most of their courses, and I found them to be really good. So they have a creating accessible documents, Word and PDF, advanced Office and advanced PDF, and they are in depth, and yeah, I found them to be excellent. And then there is our University of the Sunshine Coast full micro credential, which is an 8-week sort of online course. It is quite intensive, but it covers a lot of material. And I guess I'll end by saying that we are running this again starting on April the 27th. We've had, I think, 4 deliveries of this so far, and we're doing one more delivery in its current format. We got a big grant from the Commonwealth to do this, and so after this next delivery, we'll still do something, but it won't be quite as rich in face-to-face time. So if you are interested and able, I can recommend doing that, but I'll also pre-warn you that it is quite intense. So, but got a lot of stuff in it. So on that note, I'll hand back to Amy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Toby. It's just Amy speaking. So many incredible practical tips and tricks in there. Something that I need to remind myself of is that color contrast, and making sure that on some of our promotional materials that we do for QDN even, just triple checking the color contrast using those free checkers. So I see Ben's comment in the chat. This is great information. Eat into question time. Absolutely agree with you, Ben. Thank you, Toby, for all of your wisdom and guidance. And I guess I'd just like to open up to the floor. Does anyone have any questions or comments? And Sarah was waving.
Yeah.
Yes, go to you, Sarah, first, and then
Yeah, just
who's next?
a couple things. That was fantastic, and thank you for having the focus on the blind, low vision community as much as you did, because we often don't get represented. So thank you for that. I just want to point out a couple things. There is another software program that we do use for people with low vision called Zoom Fusion. Different to JAWS, different to the NDIV or whatever that one's called. And again, all these websites or pages will have to be tested on all devices. So that's just another one software there. And also the document, although I couldn't see it and I didn't get a chance to listen to it, I love the examples you used. Yeah, our screen readers don't worry about font. Don't worry about italic, don't worry about all that stuff. But what is troublesome, I usually get a lot of documents that say, I've highlighted a portion that we're going to discuss. That isn't read out by a screen reader. So just a heads up on that one. I used to do some accessible barrier-free design in this department in Canada. And I just want to point out a font that you might have a comment on, Toby. We used Arial as a font. So no italics, no little tick mark thingies all over the place, but we used Arial, and I know there might be some other ones that are updated, but just something else to think about when doing a website or a web page.
Yeah, I didn't. Oh, sorry. Can I respond to that? This is Toby speaking. Thanks so much for that, Sarah. And yes, I sort of didn't really talk much, particularly about neurodiversity, which is a whole other category. But particularly dyslexia, which is super common. So up to like 20% of the population identifies as having dyslexia. But for many people, even anybody, serif fonts, which are fonts with little curly bits, they're just not great for reading on online. So sans serif fonts, which means no curly bits, basically, like Arial, are generally recommended. Yep.
Yeah. Great presentation too. Thank you. It's Sarah speaking. Thank you for that. Really appreciate it.
It's just Amy speaking. Does anyone have any other questions or comments for Toby? Yeah, go ahead, Tanya.
Hi, it's Tanya speaking. I was just wondering, like, that was amazing. Thank you. You blew my mind. I've got so many to now go and do. But I also was talking to one of our clients the other day about, I work at a neighborhood center, and they said that it's really good for them to be able to, when they come to a building, see the building and inside it beforehand. And I was just wondering if anyone knows of any apps or creation tools that I could try and do to showcase our neighborhood center to add to our website so that they can see the site before they enter. It probably is a video thing, but I just, everyone's so technical now. I was just wondering if there's any tricks.
Amy, I'll jump in because I can partly answer that.
Thanks.
Tanya, good to see you again.
You too.
There's a company called Surge. So I will, Amy, do you know it? I can see you nodding your head.
Yeah, Amy speaking. Yeah, Surge is fantastic.
Yeah. So are you able to put that in the summary that you and Danielle send around, or do you want me to send it to you guys?
Yeah, we can include that. Happy for you to provide an overview of what Surge is, though, because I think it's a fantastic resource for people to be aware of.
Yeah. So we've actually, in my role as an inclusion advisor for the Queensland government, Tanya, we've actually used it for a few government buildings. And it's a little bit expensive, but it's a really good product. It measures everything, it does the video, it's quite amazing. So the reason I have my hand up, Amy and Danielle, is I just wanted to say, Toby, great presentation. Lots of little nuggets that I'll take across many areas of my role within the different communities that I engage in. But I just wanted to highlight to everyone, and apologies, Amy and Danielle and Ben and a few others. You've heard this before, but don't underestimate how many people there are still out there who either won't have anything to do with technology or particularly a mobile phone, and or they've got no idea how to use it and whatever. And what I've found with the group of people that I've had the privilege of working with on and off over the last 5 years, until you give them a reason, a personal reason, so in other words, I'll pick on Amy only because she's on my screen, until I give Amy a personal reason to need a mobile phone and a purpose for using that app, there's no way in the world Amy's going to engage in the digital space.
Thanks, Peter. It's just Amy speaking. I think Ben Noonan, you had your hand up for a period of time. Do you have a comment to make?
I do. I popped it in the chat. Thank you, Amy. Ben speaking.
Thanks, Ben.
It's Sarah here too. I'm not sure if you can see my hand. Sorry, it's Sarah.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
cool.
Sarah, I've seen your hand. I'll
Okay,
get to
good.
you in one moment. Thank you. So Ben's comment is, I really find the read aloud function helpful within Word. It allows me to hear if what I have written as well. Yeah, fantastic tip. Thanks, Ben. And Sarah.
Yep, I just want to make a comment on what Peter had mentioned about the app, about or even just someone coming into a building who needs to get directions. Anything visual is not easily related to the blind and low vision community. You cannot, this does not work for us in any capacity, but what we do appreciate is maybe a bit of a description of where the front doors are. And perhaps saying, you know, on the right-hand side, about 2 meters down, you'll find a reception desk, you know, or something like that. But there are no things like that visually, like a picture or that can actually help us navigate. So for words, we need actual words and descriptions. And one more thing I just wanted to mention, all these ideas are really, really good. Are fantastic. But rule number one when creating things, ask, don't assume. We're right here. I mean, QDN is right here. Just they'll hook you up with the right people, and we need to look over documents and things like that as well.
Thank you, Sarah. It's just Amy speaking. Any final questions before we park back to Danielle? All right. Let's pass back to Danielle, who's going to lead us through our next small activity. Thanks, Danielle.